In my previous life, I took a fatal arrow for Yi Linen, which left me blind. Yi Linen, filled with guilt, married me as his official wife. But no matter how deep the guilt, it couldn't withstand the erosion of time. Within a mere year, Yi Linen began an affair with my legitimate elder sister, and he didn't even bother to hide it from me. What he didn't know was that my eyesight had already been restored. I could see everything they did, every shameless act, every lustful glance, clear as day. Right then and there, I asked for a divorce. But Yi Linen refused and, in the struggle, accidentally killed me. What a joke. I gave him my whole heart, and this was how I ended up, tragic and broken. When I opened my eyes again, I had gone back in time, to the very moment Yi Linen and my sister were debasing themselves in front of me. This time, I decided to keep pretending I was blind. I wanted to enjoy the show. I sat quietly in the room, the perfect picture of a blind woman focused on her embroidery. From the bed not far away, strange noises began to drift over. I turned gently in that direction and asked sweetly, "Husband, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" Yi Linen was pressing my sister beneath him, completely lost in lust. Two naked bodies tangled together. It was truly an eyesore. Hearing my question, Yi Linen had to pause, trying hard to steady his breath, and replied, "It's nothing, just a little tired lately." But no matter how much he tried to steady his voice, the tremor in it couldn't be hidden. My sister, lying beneath him, bit his chest playfully, making Yi Linen grunt through clenched teeth. Her cheeks flushed. She even managed to shoot me a smug and scornful glance. If I weren't pretending to be blind, I might have just clapped for their little live sex show. In my past life, my eyesight didn't recover for a long time. My maid, Niao, once told me that Yi Linen was hooking up with Zhao Wanfeng, and that I was nothing more than a prop to spice up their sex life, a clueless extra in their twisted play. To my shame, I didn't believe her at first. Niao always said shocking things like she was auditioning for a drama. She was furious, scolded me for being brain-dead, said I deserved to be the tragic female lead in a bitter romance, always being trampled on by the male lead and the scheming supporting girl. After she finished cursing, Niao promised to cure my blindness, but only if I swore not to let Yi Linen find out. I agreed. But just as I regained my sight and was about to share the good news with Yi Linen, I caught him sneaking into my bedroom with my sister. Like they'd done it 100 times before, they strolled in and did those filthy, shameful things right in front of me. Just like Niao had warned, I'd become the oblivious husband in a cuckold movie or the random commuter on the subway, an unknowing part of their perverted roleplay. I lost all rational thought. I couldn't hold back. I caught them in the act, and in his panic, Yi Linen shoved me so hard my head cracked against a pillar. I died right then and there. It's laughable, really. I risked my life to save him in battle, gave him everything I had, and in return he gave me betrayal and death. Thank heavens for second chances. This time, I took Niao's advice. I would quietly watch the show, just a silent spectator. The shameless couple carried on in my room for a full 2 hours before finally stopping. Their poses were wild, their audacity shocking. If shame could kill, I would have died all over again. After my sister finally walked out, cheeks still flushed, Yi Linen came to my side and asked cautiously, "I took a nap just now. I didn't talk in my sleep, did I?" I smiled gently, gazing into the distance. "You said quite a bit, my husband." His expression changed. What did I say?" I replied, "You must have been dreaming of the battlefield again." You kept groaning in the strangest way. Yi Linen's face reddened. He gave an awkward cough. He told me to rest and hurried out. As soon as he left, Niao stepped in and asked, "You saw everything?" I lowered my eyes and gave a quiet Niao studied me for a moment, then burst out laughing. Well, you've been reborn." I was stunned and was just about to ask how she knew when she cut me off. "I can see her character stats." Niao always used weird terms like that. I'd long since gotten used to it. I sneered, She made such a fuss about marrying a poor scholar back then, and now she's crawling into Yelinen's bed. I looked at Nyonieo. Since that's the case, I need you to do something for me. I whispered a few words in her ear. She smiled and nodded before walking out. I walked to the window, recalling what I'd just witnessed between Yelinen and my sister. Disgust roiled in my stomach. My husband, Yelinen, once the proud Lord Yeoman. How did he become this repulsive creature? He was supposed to be a hero on the battlefield, a man who would spill blood and sacrifice for his country. While he fought on the front lines, I would wait for him at home, ready to tend his wounds and soothe his scars. That time, when the enemy ambushed us and arrows rained down like a storm, I stepped in front of him and took the deadly shot. I saved his life, but lost my sight. He held me, sobbing and trembling, calling my name again and again. Fuing, Fuing. Every word filled with anguish. I once believed that he and I shared the deepest love. But I never imagined that just a year after the war ended, just a year after we returned to the capital to live a quiet life, he would betray me with my own sister. I was merely a daughter born of a concubine in the Zhao family. 3 years ago, it was supposed to be my elder sister, the legitimate daughter, who married Yelinen. But Yelinen was about to head to the battlefield then, and my sister was terrified of war, terrified that marrying him would mean a life of hardship at the border. To escape the marriage, she hastily found herself a scholar and married him instead. That's how the engagement landed on me. Who would have thought that now, just a year after Yelinin returned to the capital, my sister couldn't wait to throw herself into his bed. Staring out at the bleak autumn scenery, I felt hatred spreading like wildfire in my heart. All my life, my sister had the first pick of everything. Whatever she wanted, I gave it to her. And now, she wanted to steal my husband too. Well then, if she wants him so badly, I'll let her have him. In the days that followed, I continued pretending to be blind. Until the 29th day of the month, when I cheerfully went to visit my mother-in-law, Madame Zhang. Madame Zhang was a sensible woman. Though she also spoiled Yelinin, she still cared about maintaining the dignity of the Earl's household. As soon as I saw her, I threw myself into her arms and choked out, "Mother, I can see again." Madame Zhang was overjoyed. Holding me tightly, she wept, "Good child. If you hadn't taken that arrow for her back then, your eyes wouldn't have." We cried together for a while, and when the tears had run their course, I gently changed the topic. "Mother, if Linen finds out, he'll be happy too. I want to give him a surprise tomorrow," I added shyly. "Please help me make it happen." Naturally, Madame Zhang agreed eagerly. After explaining my plans for the surprise, I returned to my courtyard. The next day at noon, I had Nyonieo prepare a full table of delicious dishes. I sat quietly inside, waiting for Yelinin. Finally, at the 3rd quarter of the noon hour, Yelinin arrived. Trailing right behind him was my sister, Zhao Wanfeng. Every 15th and 30th of the month, those two shameless wretches would come to my room to frolic. As Nyonieo once put it, they treated this blind woman like a kinky prop. Apparently, having a blind person nearby to listen in made things more exciting for them. Disgusting. I sat in silence. Yelinin said a few brief words to me before Zhao Wanfeng eagerly threw herself into his arms. The two of them were clinging to each other like a pair of animals in heat. I simply stared at Yelinin unblinking. He grew so unnerved that even Zhao Wanfeng's passionate kiss failed to arouse him. Sweat broke out on his forehead as he waved a hand in front of my face. Still, I didn't blink, not even a flicker of emotion. Zhao Wanfeng chuckled silently beside him, then leaned in for another kiss. Soon, they rolled onto the bed, completely entangled. Just as things were reaching a fever pitch, I suddenly cried out, "Mother, did you see that? You must stand up for me." The two on the bed were so shocked they fell right off it. In an instant, Nyonieo had already helped Madame Zhang out from the room next door. And she wasn't alone. My eldest uncle, second uncle, and fourth aunt had all come with her. A group of people now filled the doorway. 6 pairs of eyes stared at one another, wide-eyed and speechless. The air was thick with awkward silence. Everyone clearly saw what had happened, but no one dared to speak first. The silence stretched until the room was heavy with regret and disbelief. Yi Linen was drenched in cold sweat. Madame Zhang's face had gone completely pale. My uncles and aunt each wore expressions more colorful than the last. In the end, it was Zhao Wanfeng, half-naked and trembling, who finally broke the silence with a shrill, piercing scream. I sat where I was, tears streaming down my face. Mother, I just wanted to share my surprise with everyone today. I never imagined such a disgraceful thing would happen instead. My eyes were red and swollen, my voice shaking. Husband, if you love my sister, you could have just told me. I'm not a petty or jealous woman. I would never stop you from taking a concubine. So, why must you sneak around like this? I sobbed, every word sharp as a blade. And under my very nose? If I still hadn't regained my sight, I looked at Yi Linen, my voice hoarse. How long would you have kept lying to me? Madame Zhang's face was already dark as ink. She ordered her servants to help me to the front courtyard and left the room to the adulterous pair. My uncles and aunt rushed to comfort me, cursing Yi Linen as worse than a beast. How could the dignified Earl Yongin do something so shameless? Exactly. Having an affair is one thing, but doing it right under his wife's blind eyes? That's just cruelty. I tell you, that sister of Fu Ying's is just vile. How could she climb into her own brother-in-law's bed? Everyone chimed in, their voices loud with indignation. Madame Zhang's face grew darker with every word. I, meanwhile, sat quietly to the side, crying pitifully with my head lowered. When Yi Linen and Zhao Wanfeng finally emerged, Madame Zhang was seething. She ordered Yi Linen to kneel, then personally flogged him 20 times with the family rod. By the end, his back was covered in torn flesh and blood. Zhao Wanfeng stood crying beside him, pitifully begging Madame Zhang to stop. The commotion lasted for over half an hour before it finally came to an end. With the beatings and scoldings done, I collected myself and said softly, Husband, I'm not unreasonable. If you love my sister, then just bring her into the household as a concubine. I said, ever so understanding. Zhao Wanfeng's expression twisted, but she said nothing. She only bit her lip and glared at me with hatred and venom. Madame Zhang, on the other hand, was deeply moved. She wept and said, Fu Ying, after all that Linen's done to you, you can still be this forgiving? I patted her on the back, then stood up and bowed to my uncles and aunt. I pleaded with them not to spread today's scandal. Everyone praised my kindness and magnanimity as they agreed to keep silent. Then, I wrote a letter to my father, explaining everything that had happened. My father was an official in the Ministry of Revenue. With his legitimate daughter involved in such a disgrace, of course he'd help Zhao Wanfeng clean up the mess. Sure enough, 3 days later, Zhao Wanfeng's poor scholar husband sent her a formal letter of divorce. And the very next day, Zhao Wanfeng was carried through the back gate of the Earl's residence in a small bridal sedan, becoming a concubine of the Earl of Yongin. On the night Zhao Wanfeng became a concubine, Yi Linen didn't go to her chambers. Perhaps he was so moved by my magnanimity that his guilt reached an all-time high. He stayed in my room the whole night, quietly keeping me company while I painted. I was painting a ginkgo tree. Back when Yi Linen and I lived in the borderlands, we had one just like it in the backyard of our home. As soon as Yi Linen saw the painting, the guilt in his eyes deepened even more. He clutched my hand tightly, eyes red. Fu Ying, I've done you wrong. I smiled gently. How could that be? It's perfectly normal for a man to take multiple wives and concubines. I was blind before, unable to help you manage the household, I said with a look of guilt. From now on, I'll help you find a few gentle ladies to keep you company. Yi Linen was stunned. His eyes reddened on the spot. Fu Ying, you are truly the best wife in the world. I leaned against his chest, eyes lowered, speaking those thoughtful, considerate lies. Yi Linen was so pleased he practically floated away. Meanwhile, in the neighboring courtyard, my dear sister Zhao Wanfeng spent the whole night playing mournful funeral tunes on her flute. The sound drifted over with the wind, and Yi Linen's face darkened. I didn't think she'd be so thoughtless. She's just joined the household, and already she's bringing bad luck. I quickly soothed him, gently closed the window to block the flute sound, and comforted him with all the understanding in the world. Early the next morning, Zhao Wanfeng stormed into my courtyard, furious and fuming, claiming to come pay her respects. She barged straight into my bedroom and stood before me, ice cold. "Zhao Fuing, you're really something. It wasn't enough that you stole my marriage, now you even took my wedding night." I remained seated, my gaze calm as I looked at her. "Sister, you should ask your conscience before saying that." My eyes turned red. "Yes, father did arrange a marriage with my husband. But it was you who refused to marry him for fear of hardship at the border. You eloped with a scholar that very night." I continued, "Because of your runaway marriage, father and mother turned gray from worry. In the end, they had no choice but to let me marry him in your place." As I spoke, I dabbed at my eyes, putting on the picture of pitiful misery. I even recounted all the suffering I endured while stationed at the border with Yi Linen, eating coarse cornbread, sleeping on hard beds, exposed to wind and sun, aging years in just a few. But Zhao Wanfeng acted like a lunatic. She lunged at me, raising her hand to slap me, only to be stopped mid-swing by a hand that clamped down on her wrist. It was Yi Linen, his face ashen. A cold, menacing aura radiated from his whole body, his expression dark as though he had stepped out of hell itself. Zhao Wanfeng paled. "Husband, wasn't he supposed to be on duty at the military camp?" Unfortunately for her, I felt sorry for him not sleeping all night and had sent word to the camp to give him the day off. Otherwise, he would have missed this marvelous little scene. Yi Linen's grip on Zhao Wanfeng's wrist tightened. His face was like thunder. "Zhao Wanfeng, that's not what you said when you approached me." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I wonder what my sister said exactly." "She said," Yi Linen began, "back when Yi Linen brought me, blind and victorious, back to the capital, Zhao Wanfeng wasted no time. Within just 3 months, she began scheming to get close to him. She clung to Yi Linen, crying and saying that she was the one who was supposed to marry him. She claimed I had used underhanded tricks to steal the engagement, that it was my fault she ended up with a penniless scholar. She constantly poisoned Yi Linen's mind, calling me scheming, heartless, and full of malice, saying how much she hated me. At first, Yi Linen was annoyed, but he couldn't resist Zhao Wanfeng's shameless seduction. Eventually, they fell into bed. It began with subtle flirtations behind my back, but over time, their boldness grew. They became utterly shameless. Once you cross the line, it gets easier every time. In the end, they even used my supposed blindness as a prop to spice things up. The first time was thrilling. The second time, even more exhilarating. Truly a match made in hell, scum and seductress. After Yi Linen finished recounting how Zhao Wanfeng had deceived him, he grew angrier and slapped her hard across the face. She went flying to the floor, blood oozing from the corner of her mouth. Still, she didn't give up. She crawled toward Yi Linen weeping. He kicked her away without hesitation and stormed out of the room. Zhao Wanfeng froze in shock. Then, she let out a shrill scream and pounced at me, cursing as she lunged. "Zhao Fuing, I'll kill you." But Nionieo had already reacted. She called for the houseboys outside, and in an instant, they rushed in and restrained that madwoman. I stood, walked over to Zhao Wanfeng with a half-smile, and sneered. "Sister, was that really necessary?" I said flatly, "Instead of wasting your energy, why not focus on winning back your husband's favor? That seems far more practical." With that, I waved my hand. The houseboys dragged Zhao Wanfeng out and tossed her into the courtyard. After that dramatic scene, Yi Linen was completely disgusted with my sister. Clutching my hand, he apologized with guilt thick in his voice. "I can't believe I actually believed her lies and did such a thing. I've wronged you, Fuing." I quickly shook my head, understanding as always. "It's not your fault. It's all because my sister fed you nothing but lies and deceived you." Yi Linen looked even more remorseful. Sowing, you truly are the kindest woman in the world. I obediently leaned into his arms, pretending to be bashful and forgiving. For a long while afterward, Yi Linen never set foot in Zhao Wanfeng's room. As for me, I claimed my health was poor, unsuitable for sharing a bed, so Yi Linen had no choice but to sleep in the study. In the blink of an eye, a month passed. Yi Linen, after all, was a vigorous, hot-blooded man. Having trained in the army for years, his physical needs were considerable. The past few nights, Zhao Wanfeng had been loitering around outside his study, trying to cozy up to him. At first, Yi Linen had angrily told her to get lost. But starting 2 nights ago, he no longer told her to leave. He allowed her to stand quietly at the door, without saying a word. By tonight, I figured he'd finally let her inside. Sure enough, once night fell, Niao came into my room and reported. Yi Linen just called Zhao Wanfeng into the study. A man and a woman alone at night, burning with desire. No need to imagine the rest of the script. Niao asked, "What's your next move?" I smiled. "Then I'll trouble you to find a lovely, soft, and charming girl for me." Niao chuckled. "That's my specialty." She was quick. 3 days later, she brought a stunningly seductive young woman to stand before me. Her name was Mimi. She had a full, generous bosom and a slender waist so tiny it could be encircled with one hand. Even I, a woman, found her hard to resist. She was truly a rare beauty. That evening, for the first time ever, I stood at the gate myself to greet Yi Linen. Unexpectedly, Zhao Wanfeng showed up to greet him too. Right on the dusk, Yi Linen's carriage stopped in front of the Earl's estate. Both Zhao Wanfeng and I stepped forward to welcome him. Yi Linen paused as he got off the carriage, then ultimately walked toward me. Zhao Wanfeng's eyes were red as she looked at him with a pitiful expression. "Yi Lang, didn't you say we'd have dinner together tonight?" Yi Linen's face changed and he snapped. "When did I ever say that? Get lost." Zhao Wanfeng trembled all over, but still walked away, clearly unwilling to accept it. I lowered my eyes and sneered inwardly. So Yi Linen could feel shame after all? I led him to a quiet side courtyard in the back of the estate. Inside the room, Mimi was setting dishes at the table. She was an exceptionally well-mannered girl. She had already changed into a sheer, enticing outfit, low-cut and revealing a soft, full chest, as she stood beside Yi Linen, helping him arrange the dishes. Yi Linen was staring, eyes glued to her. But with me still in the room, he didn't dare be too obvious. I chuckled and said, "Husband, Mimi is my distant cousin. Her family's very poor. She's quite a pitiful girl. Fortunately, she's very thoughtful and attentive." I smiled sweetly. "So, I thought I'd introduce her to you, in hopes that you'd be willing to give her a place in this household. If you agree to take her as a concubine, it would be an act of kindness." As I spoke, I gave Mimi a subtle look. Her soft, white hands immediately reached out and grasped Yi Linen's. In a shy, delicate voice, she said, "Please, my lord, take me in." Yi Linen's eyes lit up. He was clearly already entranced by her, though he still tried to maintain a righteous appearance. "If you have nowhere else to go, then stay. I'll take you in as a concubine." I rose to my feet and left the room with Niao, without another word. Behind us, from the room, came the unmistakable sounds of a passionate night. With her stunning figure, Mimi quickly had Yi Linen wrapped around her little finger. For the next 2 months, the moment Yi Linen returned from duty, he'd head straight to Mimi's room. He spent every night there, not missing a single one. My sister could only watch from the sidelines, burning with jealousy. Of course, she tried to fight back. She started dressing as provocatively as Mimi, trying to copy her charm. But her figure couldn't compare in the slightest. Instead of seduction, she looked like a clown. Her imitation only brought Yi Linen disgust. He lashed out and scolded her viciously. She burst into tears on the spot. After crying her eyes out, she stormed into my courtyard in a rage, cursing me as a wicked woman for arranging that vixen to seduce Yi Linen. She screeched that at this rate, Mimi would drain the man dry. Watching her unravel like a madwoman, I sighed. Do you really think I'm the one who brought Mimi into the household? She froze, frowning. What are you trying to say? I began to cry. Even if I did arrange for her to come, if my husband didn't like her, what use would that be? She looked even more stunned, her expression darkening. You mean, Mimi was brought in by Yi Linen himself? I nodded sorrowfully. Wiping my tears with a handkerchief, I walked closer and said gently, if I were you, I wouldn't just sit around waiting for things to get worse. She snapped. Then what do you think I should do? I replied, the border has been unstable again lately. The Turks are eyeing it hungrily and have launched multiple raids. These past few days, my husband's been run ragged over this. I imagine he'll be deployed to the front lines again soon, I continued. If you volunteer to go with him, to care for him in the field, he'll surely look at you differently. Her expression shifted. After a long pause, she said, but the border is dangerous. What if something happens? I sneered. Are you still afraid of danger? If you don't start fighting for your own future, do you really plan to rot in this courtyard forever as a fated, unwanted woman? I'm not like you, I added coldly. I once took an arrow for Yi Linen at the border. The emperor rewarded me with a noble title. Even without my husband's favor, I can live a life of honor and dignity. But you're nothing more than a concubine, married to Yi Linen after already being with another man. If you don't seize this chance, when will you ever have another? My sister clenched her jaw and said nothing. I waved her off, telling her to return to her quarters and think it through. She left in a daze. A little over a month passed. During that time, Yi Linen continued to stay in Mimi's room night after night. Not only did he avoid stepping into my sister's chamber, he even looked coldly at her whenever they crossed paths in the courtyard. News soon spread across the capital. Yi Linen was to be deployed to the border once more. Before his departure, my sister did as expected. She approached Yi Linen and volunteered with deep emotion, saying, no matter where my husband goes, I wish to follow. Yi Linen frowned slightly. That night, he came to my courtyard to have a private talk with me. He said softly, wife, Mimi is pregnant now. The household needs someone steady to oversee everything in my absence. I handed him a pair of fox fur knee warmers and wrist guards that I had personally made. These are from my own hands. The borderlands are freezing. Keep them close. Yi Linen was deeply moved and accepted the gifts with gratitude. I said, please don't worry, husband. I'll stay home and take good care of Mimi. When she gives birth to a son, I'll adopt him as my own, raise him as the heir of the household. I won't let him suffer. Yi Linen was overwhelmed with emotion. After expressing his thanks, his tone shifted. Zhao Wanfeng may be your sister by blood, but her behavior is vile. Nothing like your grace and virtue. I plan to take her with me to the border. I don't trust her staying here alone with Mimi. I nodded in agreement, praising his decision. 5 days later, Yi Linen set out with over 10,000 soldiers, taking Zhao Wanfeng along with him. I stood atop the city wall, accompanied by Mimi, whose belly was just beginning to show, watching them leave. Mimi smiled sweetly. My lady, once I give birth to the child, how do you plan to thank me? I curved my eyes into a smile. I've already purchased a house and fertile land for you in Jiangnan. You'll be well taken care of. Mimi raised an eyebrow and looked at me. Speaking of which, are you really that certain Yi Linen won't make it back this time? I smiled coldly.
Of course I am.
Absolutely certain. The vast and Ding Marquis Manor was now left with only Mimi and me. Nyoniao and I lived quietly behind closed doors in my courtyard, while Mimi stayed in hers, focused on her pregnancy. One morning, Nyoniao handed me a booklet filled with the names and details of handsome men. Pick a story to start, she said. I flipped through it casually. Beneath each man's portrait were detailed notes. These 4 were carefully selected by yours truly, Nyoniao explained. They are the unstable crown prince, the roguish martial artist, the dark-bellied scholar, and the loyal puppy-like general. Pick one, and we'll start your new script. I was just about to comment on the first one when Nyonieo added, "The Crown Prince is exciting, yes, but his mood swings are wild. He's also got a tendency toward domestic violence." The second one, the martial artist, is from a secret identity plot. He might look like a carefree wanderer, but he's secretly gathering intel for the Emperor. Very high risk, might die tragically. I quickly turned the page. "This scholar is cunning and brilliant," she went on, "but after topping the imperial exams, the first thing he'll do is kill his beloved. You'll be buried alive in a mountain, and he'll return to take revenge later." Too terrifying. I hurried to the last option. Nyonieo grinned. "Now, the loyal general is my top pick. He's sweet, fiercely devoted, and totally loyal. He'd even be fine being your boy toy." I perked up. All right, him it is. 3 days later, Nyonieo and I lay in wait outside Hangzhou Temple on the outskirts of the city. When the moon rose over the willow trees, a thin figure collapsed onto the path, unconscious. We rescued him and brought him back to the Inding Marquis Manor. He was gravely wounded with severe internal injuries. I personally nursed him day and night for 3 days before his condition finally stabilized. He looked to be around 16 or 17, strongly built and strikingly handsome. Nyonieo hadn't lied. When he woke up, his gaze was hazy as he looked at me. "You saved me?" I nodded bashfully. He said his name was Jiu Zhao, an ordinary young soldier. While delivering a confidential letter to the capital, he'd been ambushed and injured badly during the escape. I told him to rest in the manor and took meticulous care of him. He recovered quickly. Within a month, he was already leaping over rooftops and occasionally disappearing at night for secret missions. To outsiders, I said he was my cousin. In private, we flirted and exchanged sweet glances. Jiu Zhao was indeed a loyal puppy. No matter what he did outside, he always came back on time to protect me. A real man bears the weight of the world. While he worked beyond the walls, I stayed in the inner courtyard, sewing baby clothes for Mimi's child. These past few days, Jiu Zhao was out again, and Mimi's labor began. I called a midwife to help deliver the child, and by nightfall, she gave birth to a baby boy. I held the newborn in my arms, utterly enchanted, and told Mimi to get some rest. That night, Jiu Zhao returned. He silently entered my room and hugged me from behind, saying nothing for a long time. I looked at him and smiled. "What's wrong? You seem upset." He nuzzled into my neck like a puppy, his voice low. "The war on the frontier is nearly over. We've defeated the Xiongnu. Yilinen will be back soon." I raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that good news?" His eyes reddened. "If Yilinen comes back, does that mean I can't stay by your side anymore?" Little puppy Jiu Zhao's eyes brimmed with tears. "But Fuing, I don't want to leave you. Can't I stay with you forever?" He clung to my sleeve. "I don't care if all I do is serve you tea and run errands. Just let me stay." I smiled sweetly. "Who said I was kicking you out?" I cupped his fair jaw and ran my fingers down his throat. His eyes darkened. "My lady, Jiu Zhao will always be your loyal dog. You're not allowed to abandon me." He scooped me up and carried me to the bed. Half a month later, news arrived that Yilinen was returning from the frontier. But just before he could re-enter the capital, something unexpected happened. Perhaps from years of exhaustion, his arms and legs began to lose strength. The illness spread quickly. By the time his army arrived back in the city, he could no longer move his limbs. He was completely paralyzed, lying limp like a useless corpse. The emperor was alarmed and sent numerous imperial physicians to the manor. But none of them could cure him. Some even claimed Yilinen had been poisoned, a slow, creeping toxin that had penetrated his tendons and nerves. That's why no one noticed at first. But once it reached the deeper channels, there would be no saving him. His limbs would fail, his voice would vanish, and all medicine would be useless. Yilinen had become a cripple, with no chance of recovery. When the emperor learned of this, he was furious and blamed it on the Turks. But with Yilinen now a broken man, the emperor quickly lost interest. He elevated the title of the Marquis and granted the manor some land and jewels. But after that, he no longer bothered with Yi Linen's affairs. And so Yi Linen was left to rot, lying in bed all day, completely dependent on others to eat, drink, and relieve himself. As for my sister, who had gone to the frontier with him, she came back with a crippled leg and a vicious scar across her face. The scar was jagged and terrifying. Since her return, she wept daily. To anyone passing by, it was as if a funeral had occurred at the Inding Marquis Manor. She sobbed, "Zhao Fuing, you have no idea how terrifying the frontier was. The Turks raided villages often. They'd capture any woman they saw, abuse her until she died. It was horrifying." Apparently, she'd been caught during one such raid. She escaped, but her foot was maimed and her face torn. Once she was disfigured, Yi Linen couldn't even bear to look at her, let alone let her serve him. Instead, he assigned her to do rough labor. I listened impatiently to her complaints, then said coldly, "The frontier was always going to be hard. Complaining now, what's the point?" She fell silent and withdrew to her quarters, never coming out again. One day, I sent someone to check on her and found her room completely empty. All the valuables had been taken. My sister was gone. When the servant reported it, I was sitting beside Yi Linen's bed, cuddling with Jiao Zhao. I didn't even lift my eyes. Let her go. Yi Linen lay motionless in bed, eyes wide open, glaring at us with fury. I wrapped my arms around Jiao Zhao's neck and fed him a grape. I gasped, "Zhao Zhao, look at my husband. He's staring at me with such a terrifying look." Jiao Zhao immediately shifted to block Yi Linen's line of sight and gently comforted me. I kissed Jiao Zhao on the cheek, only for him to pin me down beneath him. On the bed, Yi Linen could only let out muffled sobs. Yes, it was, in fact, thrilling. After Mimi completed her postpartum recovery, she took the large sum of money I gave her and headed south to Jiangnan. They say she now keeps several handsome men in her private estate and lives a life of luxury and pleasure. As for Jiao Zhao, once a young soldier in the military, he's steadily risen through the ranks. These days, he's being valued more and more and has begun receiving important assignments. Only I remained, keeping vigil beside Yi Linen every day, chatting with him from time to time. As I gently combed through his long hair, I spoke in a soft voice, "Husband, remember those fox fur knee pads and wrist guards I made for you? I laced them with a rare nerve-softening poison I bought for a high price." At my words, Yi Linen's eyes flew open, wide with disbelief. I smiled. "I controlled the dosage so perfectly, just enough to trigger your condition right after your glorious return to the capital." Ha! I burst into laughter, my joy uncontrollable, even as I combed his hair with increasing tenderness. Leaning close to his ear, I whispered, "But don't worry. I'll make sure you live a long, comfortable life. I want you to watch. Watch as I love someone else. Watch as I take over this grand marquis, piece by piece." Yi Linen went berserk. His eyes bulged with red veins, his teeth grinding so hard they clacked. Startled, I set down the comb and called for the physician. He was given calming medicine, and as expected, Yi Linen fell into a deep, obedient sleep. 3 years passed in a flash. Half a year ago, Jiao Zhao crushed the rebellion in the northern frontier. He's now favored by the emperor and holds the rank of a young general. But this little general still runs straight to my courtyard every night, happily playing the part of my loyal dog. Meanwhile, I raised the son Mimi bore alone, winning praise throughout the capital for being a model of virtue and grace. A few months later, Nioniao and I took little Chiner on a trip to Jiangnan. There, in a boat pavilion by the water, we ran into a veiled woman playing the pipa. She played beautifully but never lifted her veil. Each time she finished performing, she would limp away in a hurry. Chiner curled up in my arms, speaking in a soft, childish voice. "Mama, that auntie is so pitiful." I patted his little head. Pitiful people often have brought it on themselves. Forget it. Leave her a few silver coins. The end.